I do want to bring in CNN national security analyst and former deputy national intelligence officer for Russia, Eurasia to the National Intelligence Council, Andrea Kendall-Taylor, with us, as well as former deputy assistant secretary of state and the vice president of global policy and public affairs for the National Peace Corps Association, Joel Rubin. Okay, I think what's noteworthy about the speech is what he did not say, right?
Absolutely. Far more notable for what it didn't say. So no official declaration of war, no mass mobilization, which was maybe unsurprising given the really significant political and economic costs that would have had. But also no sense of victory, no sense of progress. I think that's what I found most surprising is he didn't talk about Mariupol or Kherson or try to spin this as progress for Russia in the east and the south. And then no nuclear saber rattling. And finally, there was no, as we heard Matthew Chance say, though, no sense of when this war would end. I didn't take from this speech someone who was ready to back down. And so in that sense, I think we're still looking at a situation that's going to grind on for a very long time.
Yeah, what was the takeaway for you?
Yeah, Brianna, this was a defensive speech, without a doubt. This is Vladimir Putin trying to justify again and again why he illegally invaded Ukraine. And if anything, this is a victory day for Ukraine. This is a strategic failure for Russia right now. It's clear that Russia is suffering economically at home. There are predictions of 10 to 15% GDP loss over this coming year, which is cataclysmic. We're looking at another $20 billion in American military aid coming in. NATO's unified, potentially expanding. There's going to be a summit in late June in Madrid, which is going to highlight those shared values that NATO and the West and Ukraine have. So this is a major loss for Vladimir Putin on the world stage. This was a nothing burger. Basically, his speech just fell flat, and it demonstrates that he really has no vision for what he's trying to do any longer with Ukraine.
Is he worried about his position in Russia? When I think about what everyday Russians are going through economically, the burden that they're bearing where their sons are dying in this war, does he worry that that affects his security as a leader?
I mean, I would imagine that he would have to worry, right? I mean, again, he has linked, I think, his fate to the war in Ukraine. He has framed this as existential, not just for Russia, but for himself. And so any kind of sense of defeat, a clear, humiliating defeat for Putin would, I think, be extremely destabilizing. But I think that's why we saw him in this speech. It was my sense that he was trying to tamp down expectations. He wasn't calling on Russians to make great sacrifices like they did in World War II. It was very kind of muted. And in that sense, I think that the expectation shaping was key.
And you know what we can glean from that as well is he may not have the political space inside Russia to do more. There may not be enough bandwidth, quite frankly, for Vladimir Putin to pull more assets into the fight, to draft Russians, to tell the oligarchs to continue to hold tight. He may be really running out of rope. We don't know exactly. Criminology is incredibly opaque, but it doesn't appear in public that he's exactly rallying more forces to his side within Russia, which is a pretty significant tell.
If he's running out of road, right? I mean, the conventional wisdom has been, yes, Ukraine is occasionally pushing back Russian forces. David is besting Goliath here or there, but Russia is the meat grinder. And that is what is going ultimately, very possibly going to prevail. But if he doesn't have that will inside, Andrea, does that challenge that conventional wisdom?
Well, I think what it challenges is also a segment within the Russian public who is calling for more outright victory in Ukraine, right? So this is a balancing act for him in the sense that there are a lot of people domestically who I think don't support the war. But we see increasingly vocal calls for outright victory in Ukraine, maximalist goals, and he's going to have to balance those two things. I think the important thing to note, too, coming out of this speech, though, is just because he didn't mobilize forces today doesn't mean that he won't at a later date. So that's still something he can pull on if he feels that he is faltering and that he needs that replenishment in order to sustain Russia's efforts in Ukraine.
That we shouldn't rule that out.
Don't rule it out.
I also wonder, especially looking at the historical context of this day, Joel, like, this is about, I mean, when you look at the Russian sacrifice or when you look at the Soviet sacrifice, right, in World War II, you're talking about so many millions of deaths. And in a way, Russia has this pride of that, the sacrifice that was made. They don't forget that, but they take pride in the strength that they exhibited, and that they push back the Nazis. They take pride in that. I wonder, though, if that transfers to what's going on in Ukraine. Does that pride, does that will still exist when it comes to what we're seeing in Ukraine, or is this a whole different ball of wax?
Well, so do the Ukrainians. They also take pride in this, as we saw President Zelensky, who's Jewish, takes pride in the fact that Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union that defeated the Nazis. And we in America, we take pride in this too. I don't think that's a casus belli for the Russian people. Vladimir Putin has been time and again banging on the idea that he's defeating Nazis. We even had the vitriolic statements recently by the Foreign Minister Lavrov calling essentially Zelensky an ally, a Jewish leader, an ally of the Nazis. It didn't fly. It doesn't work. The Russian people, if they're mobilized by Victory Day, that's one thing because it's national pride. But to see that translate to more and further aggressive actions, clearly Vladimir Putin didn't think he had the ability to do that today on Victory Day.
Really interesting speech today. I think you're so right. Expectations management. Great to discuss this with you. I appreciate it, you guys. Thanks.